So today will be our last class for IELTS speaking, and as such, we will be doing all forms of task 3. Yeah, we will be doing task 3 as no part 3 as a whole. Sorry. Yeah. So after we review the final two types, we will go over the other types again and answer some questions. I'll also give my sample answer as I didn't do it last time. Anyways, so we're going to go to the first part, the first type, which is type 3 in today, which is the problems and solutions. So this is actually a really popular writing task 2 format because it is a pretty interesting one to give your own opinions. And it is very versatile, especially for writing, which is why it's a common one in writing. And it's safe to say that it's also really common in speaking because speaking part 3, because as I already mentioned before last class, speaking part 3 and writing task 2 are pretty similar in its core. They're basically the same thing. They're trying to force you to answer global questions. And yeah, so now this part now we need to have we will have a few different types of questions. So the first type of question that we have to provide here is the causes. Um, yeah. All right. So what do I mean by the causes here? Um, the causes here mean. Wait, give me a second. Um, give me a second, real quick. Uh, hmm. All right. So the causes here, they would usually ask you about the reason why something happens. That's the basic definition for causes. It is why something happens. So usually it would ask why one thing is important, or why do some things happen. So usually it's why do some things happen, or why do you think things are important. Again, it's your opinion. I can't really help you with ideas making here. I can only give you like 5 W's. You need to think what, why, where, when, and how. Usually you need to dive deeper on the subjects. So for example, if we take why do you think sports are important? You need to think what the core of sports are. Core of sports is basically exercise and fun. So, if sports were about exercise and if sports were about fun, then you need to say that in your speech. To tell the examiner, you need to tell your examiner that sports is important because, first of all, it is fun. It is fun to do with your friends, and second of all, it is healthy for you. That's a pretty simple one. Don't answer it like that. You need to give more reasoning. But yeah, forming ideas is something that you will need to practice, and we will be practicing forming ideas later in this class. But yeah, that's how you would answer. That's how you would create ideas for the reasons. The next are the effects. Now, what do I mean by the effects? The effects are basically, if you have a cause, you need to have an effect. So if there's a cause to something, you need to tell them, you need to examine the effects of sports. Oh no, the effects of whatever issue we were talking about. I'm starting around sports. We were talking about sports before. So let's take the example again. The examiner may also ask the effects of sports on children, or maybe on a specific age. You can say that it's pretty healthy. It improves their overall health. Again, this time you need to think about now instead of last time you need to think the core reasons why people do something. In this case, you should think what what is the benefits or disadvantages that people get out of this. So maybe smoking, you should say why smoking is unhealthy, right? You should tell the examiner what are the negative effects of smoking to answer an effect question. Whereas for the reasons question, you should answer why people like to smoke. Why do people like to smoke when smoking is really unhealthy? That is what they want you to answer. For example. So yeah, though, and finally is probably the hardest one because it requires the most creativity, answers, and solutions. So every problem has a solution. Even the most unsolvable problems in the entire world has a solution. Solution. Even if there is the word unsolvable in it, there is a solution. We just haven't found it yet. So, most of the time, it will have a huge relationship with the government. Many of these questions, because they're about the global, about our governments, the global status, etc. You will mostly have to answer it by using the government. So, for these questions, try to credit the government. The government has to do something. The government has to do that. The government has to do something. I don't know. It depends on what the question is. But but the ideal way you would answer to part three in this part of part three is you need to try to credit it to the government, or you need to find a proper solution towards this. Of course, not all questions will actually be about the government, but seeming that part three and task two are pretty similar in its core. And since I did a lot of task two, I can say that the government is actually a really good way to credit. However, you should also credit it towards the people as well. But yeah. Alright, so now that we know a small idea of how you would answer this in terms of ideas, let's see how you would structure it, since a good structure is also important. Now, now, for all three of these, you need to always start out with a topic sentence. However, because these three are so different in its core, the topic sentences are different. Now, the reasons causes will have, well, I think that there are some or several or a number of reasons for this. Usually I use a number of reasons, but you can use several or some, or I suppose instead of I think. But yeah, you should also be a bit uncertain because again, being uncertainty is not a bad thing here. In fact, it's good because you actually don't have any sources, so it's ideal for you to do so. Now, now you need to for effects, you need to say that there are some you need to describe that there are, well, again, you just say a word of many things, so some, several, or number, and then you say big or major, which means huge, basically, and then you say positive or negative influences impacts. Usually, usually positive influences go better and negative impacts go better. It is just more grammatic, because impact is a slightly negative term, while influence is also is more of a neutral term because you do see influence used positively and negatively, but impact is used more negatively in my opinion. So yeah, it's better for you to use negative impacts instead of negative influences, in my opinion. Anyways, so now you just say, oh, there are some issues of X. So this is to describe the problems of something, which, well, isn't up here, I know, but it's going to be pretty similar to the reasons and causes, but yeah. And finally, solutions. So, well, well, these are some ways you can answer it. I would say the second one, well, I think there are a number of actions that can be taken to tackle this issue is a really good one. Mainly because tackling this issue is a pretty good pretty good set of words that you could use for your part three. But yeah, mostly the other ones aren't as good as well. So, you need to give, now you need to give out your first idea or your main idea, first main idea. Now, as always, to introduce an idea, you need to say firstly or first of all. Linking words are pretty important for high cohesion and coherence scores. Without linking words, they will not mark you high for cohesion coherence, and cohesion coherence is the backbone of everything. So if you don't score that one high, you won't score lexical accuracy high, lexical range high, nor grammatical accuracy. Maybe, yeah, and maybe even pronunciation, because pronunciation also relies on the way you speak as well. So like stuttering and stuff. And linking words really help to reduce the stuttering and the occasional stutters or the repetition in words you would say. That I believe goes to pronunciation as well. So, yeah, make sure to use your linking words, guys. Linking words are pretty important. Now, you need to give out your main idea, and then after that, you need to give, you could give the first adjective as such as possible, feasible, or practical. I would say practical and feasible are good ones that I would usually use most of the time. I suggest you guys use words like those too. Yeah. And then you would add the noun, which is the idea of your problem. So reason or cause or effect, problem or solution. This depends on the question you're answering, but yeah. So, for example, if we had a solution question, I would answer the first feasible solution would be that blah blah blah. Now you need to add your main first idea. Yeah. Uh, so you need to add, so after you add your first idea, yeah, you would need to add, would need to slightly add some examples if there is time. Usually because you were answering 45 seconds to a minute, you might not have enough time. However, it is suggested to make a small example to gain some more points for coherent, yeah, just coherence, cohesion and stuff. But basically, you would probably give, for example, or for instance, and then you give them a small example of what your solution. So, for example, if we take the example here, the first feasible solution to solve the problem of housing is for the government to build more blocks or flats for the residents. Flats for the residents. Then I would say, then I would add that, for for example, the government could invest few million of dollars in their citizens' tax money to start a program called program that could provide building for areas with a high population rate. However, without high population rate, but low high population density rate. There you go. Um, High population density means that there's a lot of people in one area, and usually that means that most of them are stuck. That means more people live in one place. So yeah, that would be a quick example one could make. Now, now you need to give your second main idea. Your second main idea, I would say, would be the bit less developed one out of the two. So, so if you have a really developed first main idea, go all out on the first main idea. After you finish talking, if there's still a substantial amount of time, start your second main idea. Because no sane person would think about their main idea for, a very long time. Like, no, like, you don't have that much time to think of two really detailed solutions or problems or causes. So what I suggest you to do is to really develop one and give another one just for show. So you would, so then, if you still have time, you could give your second main idea. And in that case, in your second main idea, you will do the same thing as the first main idea, just that it's a bit less developed. In my opinion, it's a bit hard. I know it's a bit hard for you guys to create two ideas in a pretty short amount of time. Again, you guys remember that you guys will not have any time at all to prepare for these speaking type three part three questions. You will probably have around 10 seconds to read the question and you need to think of an answer right after. So I suggest you guys practicing how to create ideas as fast as possible while still having them make sense. So yeah, that's basically your second mini idea. So, let's have a look. Let's have a look at a sample speech. Um, as you can see, as you can see, there since they have probably prepared beforehand, they have done a lot of elaboration upon their answers. You can see that they said, oh, they like to meet up with their friends and we get to do something enjoyable like seeing a film or going out for dinner. Um, this is actually a pretty good speech. I would say. However, I don't think you guys would actually reach this amount of detail in part three, specifically because again of the time constraints. So what I suggest for so what I think most of my answer that fits this time constraint would probably be something like this. Well, I think there are a variety of reasons why friendship is important. First and foremost, friends are pretty important, indispensable to our lives, so we have somebody to talk to. Whether it is going to dinner or watching a movie or just doing anything enjoyable on the weekends and maybe even weekdays, meeting up with my friends usually keeps a smile on my face. And I've also talk a lot with my friends on many issues on the world, and maybe just talking about some things that we're interested in together. Additionally, I'd also say that my friends are a pretty good way of helping out when I am in a state that I am in a troublesome state. They would usually provide me with some comfort or advice with such situation, which would not come if I hadn't made friends with them. So yeah, that's a pretty decent answer. As you can see, my first reason is way more developed than my second reason, and that's what I expect most of you guys would do as well, since the way part three works. So yeah, um, that is how I would answer this question. Yeah. So, as you can see here, we are going to look at an effect now. Now, now this we're going to in this one we're going to answer. They're answering what the effect does new technology have on employment. This one is actually quite shorter, and unlike the other ones, since this one is actually pretty easier for you guys, in my opinion, I think you guys are perfectly going to do well developing two main ideas because technology is such a commonly used subject in IELTS. So yeah, um added on to the environment one, I also would suggest you guys to learn a few technology vocabulary, since it is a commonly used topic, especially AI related vocabulary nowadays, because examiners are definitely going to be on the lookout for AI discussion. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure if I'm not wrong, there was a time when I did out speaking where they did discuss about AI for language learning or something. So yeah, AI is actually a pretty commonly discussed topic as well due to the rise of it. So be sure to learn your technology and AI, guys. I know it's not ideal. I don't like AI either, but if you want to score decently well, you might have to study some of these keywords and vocabulary so that you could get used to it. So, as you can see, they split their text into three parts as normal. You, of course, need to say your introduction. And then they went on. Well, they took both sides. Taking both sides in IELTS speaking is actually normal, since again, taking both sides is a valid option in IELTS writing task 2 as well. I also took both sides in my IELTS writing. I believe it was the first time I took writing. So yeah. I'm sorry if I'm saying I took the IELTS test a couple of times. So yeah, there's a lot of experiences here that I could vouch for. So yeah. But as you can see here, um, as you can see here, usually, and when you take both sides, you would usually put the argument that you like more at towards the end. So if you say that you hate technology, but you do acknowledge there are some positive developments, I would say for you to say the positive developments first, and then say the negative things about it later. And you could also probably give counter arguments. This is a pretty interesting way how I answer questions because it gives you a bit more depth. And again, depth is pretty important for IELTS speaking if you want to score decently, as it would give the examiner more basis to score you on, meaning that they have the enough words to score higher. So yeah, remember to do that. I'd say now. Um, now, um, as for the ideas here, for the ideas here, new technology and employment rates, for this one, if I have to really try, for the problems on effects, as I have already discussed on you guys, try to connect both of the things that they're asking for. So in this case, they're asking for what effect does new technology have on employment. Think about employment. What do people work? What do people work? Well, think about some jobs that have connection to technology. Some jobs that would be replaced by technology or improved by technology. Try to think about that. You need to think about that, but you also need to think again. Also need to think, yep, yep, technology does make you lose jobs because, well, it makes things better. However, you need to also think, how do you run the technology? You need dedicated people to run this technology. I know this will be hard to create in like 30 seconds, but think the best you can and create the idea. I think it won't be that hard, especially because we're in a tech-reliant age, and you have guys, especially we're actually the people that hear the most news on AI and technology replacing people's jobs. So yeah, try to think about that. Now, solutions. Um, this is actually one of the ones where you shouldn't credit the government. Actually, I was wanting a question where you can't really blame or force the government to solve this problem because it would be stupid to do so. Like, we should ask the government to fix culture shock? No. A foreigner cannot just tell the government, I don't know the culture here, and force the government to fix it. Because it isn't an important issue to the government, and rather it is because of the foreigner themselves not being prepared. So, how would you answer a question with the government not on your side? Well, you would answer it as normal. Now, for culture shock, you need to think, what is the cause of culture shock? Culture shock is mostly caused because someone isn't prepared enough to go to another culture and they are, well, shocked because many things are different from their home country. So, what do we mean by this? Well, you need to start and prepare before that. Understand the culture. If you're gonna live there for a long time, you need to understand what is going on in their culture. What is A, what is B. You need to learn some basic things about the country. If you're going there for tourism, that isn't as a strict one. But if you're going there to study and you don't know anything, you need to think the main cause of culture shock. And most of these people are probably going to be visiting for a pretty long time. So yeah, you need to tell them to be more prepared. And yeah. Um, the other part of culture shock is because one lives in another country, they actually don't know anybody. It's hard to discuss, it's hard to make friends because you're in a completely different country. So yeah, give me a second. So yeah, um, so yeah, the other part of culture shock, as I already mentioned, is the fact that, well, and the fact that culture that they don't really speak the language, so they can't be friends. Um, Now think, many countries would probably be very prepared. They would be very open towards foreigners. Most of the time, there will be open events for people to do it. Yeah. So you need to say that there are some events that people could attend to, make friends and yeah. So that's basically it for this part. I'm sorry for yapping a bit, but this is a pretty important part. We will come back to the questions soon, so you make sure you guys want to answer one of them. Give me a second. All right, now the final type is future slash prediction. Now, this is a question that happens also pretty frequently. Now, this question would ask what will happen in the future. We've discussed the past, we've discussed now, the problems now. Now we're discussing the future. So, we will have two main ways that they would ask for future slash prediction. So, um, first of all is how or what will something change in the future? So what ways will it change, right? Usually it would be a pretty huge general thing. So maybe the current state of the world will it change in 50 years? Change in 25 years? Will I don't know. Infrastructure change in 20 years? Will the way we eat change in 20 years? So basically, pretty general questions that you would ask, and you need to answer based on your opinion. So this is the time you take your slightly decent amount of scientific intelligence onto this, because some of these questions might be a bit leaning towards the scientific side. It's okay if you guys don't aren't correct, because again, they won't be that strict, and because well, they're gonna ask in like 10 or 20 years. They won't just remove your IELTS band score in 20 years, mainly because your IELTS score will be over 2 years after you get the band itself. It would expire, so there's no reason in checking it. So yeah. Um. Now, now, do you think X will do something in the future is a more detailed version of this. Do you think X will do something in the future is very detailed actually. It would be a pretty specific scenario, but it's also pretty Yeah, it's pretty general, but also it's less general and more specific. So, for example, as you can see, as the technology for home viewing improves, do you think people will stop going to the cinema in the future? So, as you can see, compared to the last one, where we were just talking about general things like infrastructure, design, and basically just general questions about the world, we jumped from that to this ridiculously weird. Why do you change? Why do you think people will go to the cinema because we have Netflix type questions? So as you can see, if you get the second type, you need to pretty much lock in a bit more because you will need to develop more advanced answers towards this. Now, how would you answer how slash what will X change in the future? Now, you would say that first of all, you need to say, well, you would say that there will be several changes in the future, and then you need to, or you say that it's pretty unpredictable. Um, because there are some things that you yourself probably don't know. So you could say it's unpredictable for you, or it's just really unstable. So let's say if you're asking about the status of the world. Well, for if you know anything about the world right now, it is pretty unstable. Israel and Iran, no, sorry, Israel, the U.S. and Iraq are not really liking each other. Israel and Palestine are its own thing. They're already Ukraine and Russia are pretty much done for. China's rising. Yeah, the world right now is pretty unstable, and we don't know what would happen next. So you are perfectly fine to say that it is a pretty unpredictable topic if you're going to talk about the world. Now, um, now in the case where oh sorry, uh, you need to give in a case where you do say that yeah, you need to say that well, it is you need to say the first thing that you believe would happen. So, for example, if we're gonna talk about the state of the world, again, it's not doesn't have to be politically correct, but if you're gonna say something about the world, you could say something like, well, Israel will become something big, something like that. Israel could, rise. You don't need to be exactly accurate, or you would say Israel and U.S. will win the war against Iraq, which I actually don't believe. I'm just saying some random stuff for this class. But yeah, you would something say that it is there's a high chance that that would happen, and you would use some of these terms to answer it. Now you would answer secondly. Well, you need to answer the second one, and then you need to start elaborating. Now, if I was to say that Israel were to win the war against Iraq and Palestine, I will say I could also say that it's a high chance that Israel will take both of those countries and become a larger country, becoming a more powerful threat with the addition of help between the U.S.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Could we like, if something is not certain, could we just say, um, firstly, I think it's not certain that something blah blah will happen.
Um, Not recommended because there should be things that you are sure that should happen. If you're not sure, you shouldn't say it. Like you want to be certain, like as in you are certain, but you also give them a slight room for uncertainty. I did say that uncertainty is a good thing, but you also need to be at least like 70% certain. Not if you're gonna be like 30% certain, don't even mention it, okay? If you're gonna say if you're actually going to think that Israel is gonna become a powerful country or something, and you're like 10% sure that Israel will actually win both those wars and become powerful, then don't say it because it won't be a good argument because it's not likely to happen. Now, then you would say secondly, you would repeat the same thing again. You would mention two critical events to the situation. The first and the second event. The second event will happen, of course, after the first event. Actually, they can happen in unison, or before and after. But usually, I believe a first and then second would be probably be more correct. So yeah. As you can see, The first idea is pretty developed. However, the second idea is rather half-baked in the future in this future topic. Um, so yeah, I think we need to leave and rejoin. So yeah, I need to end real quick. Class